Now, we begin with the Defective Apartments because the government is preparing a €2.5 billion redress scheme to deal with widespread defects in apartment buildings built during the Celtic Tiger years, problems that affect up to 100,000 homeowners nationwide. But while the state moves to pick up the bill, developers responsible for fire safety, structural and water ingress defects are expected to face no consequences. Joining us now is Sam Doran. Sam's a spokesperson for the Not Our Fault campaign and is with us to chat about the scheme and Bru Na Sionna Apartments in Shannon. Sam, a very good morning to you. Sam, just to kick things off, for listeners who mightn't be familiar with the Not Our Fault campaign, can you just briefly explain a bit about that and what apartment owners like yourself have been dealing with for years?
Yeah, Not Our Fault campaign would have been started because people going about their normal life one day, and then the next day they were told you have fire defects in your building, and they were told we need 15,000 a year off you over the next 5 years to go ahead and sort these out. And if you don't pay up, you're going to be put out of your home, your mortgage is going to be called in, and so it was an awful lot of a belt over the back of the head, I suppose you could say. Like, the people got total shock because two things that people remember is the day to get the keys to their new apartment, they move in, and then they remember the day that they got that bad news. And so people couldn't afford to pay that. So Not Our Fault was formed from people, individual homeowners, and nowhere to go, like saying, this is your problem. And we were like, no, we all bought apartments in good faith. From 1999 to 2013, the government allowed builders self-regulate. So there was no inspection on the building. So as far as we were concerned, the government had dropped the ball. So we reckoned it wasn't our fault. We had done all due diligence. We had got surveyors in when we were buying the apartments. They looked it over. And then the small print at the end was there was no opening works carried up, as the best we could see, that this building did comply with the plans. So had it been built according to the plans, there wouldn't have been a problem. But of course, greed cut in, and shortcuts were taken, and people were left in a mess. So we campaigned outside Leinster House there every Wednesday. I suppose before that, I should say, like, we went to local newspapers, local radios, and then they got national coverage, and then RTE Prime Time, Virgin Media covered it, and then the government, they had to come to the table. They couldn't walk away from it.
Yeah, once it was highlighted. And Sam, yeah. What is it actually like, day to day, to be living in a building with known fire safety or structural defects? Is your mind ever at ease, or is there always a party in the back of your mind, or maybe more to the forefront, wondering, is today the day something bad could happen?
Yes, in our own development, we've had 3 near misses over the last 12 months. Like, simple things. In an apartment block, your biggest fear really is cigarettes. Like a person going out onto a balcony, having a cigarette at night before they go to bed and flicking the cigarette off the balcony. And as the wind blows it back in onto the balcony below, maybe the person below didn't say, well, I leave the bins till in the morning and bring them down. They leave a bag of rubbish on the balcony and the cigarette comes back in and can ignite the rubbish. And then the whole building is gone. So if, especially if something happens at night, during the day, yes, it's better because people are awake and they're up and around, and time is critical. That if you can catch it at the very start rather than, on the back foot, So people do be terrified. Like, we've seen people in developments crying when they got the news, trying to cope with it, because these people are working, they're trying to pay a mortgage, they're trying to rear children. Most of the heating in these apartments is electrical, which is expensive. So, the pin is to their collar. They can't afford anything like this. And their whole lifestyle changes. I've seen people turn into shells of people from, being hit with this kind of thing. So it is, it has an awful effect on them.
And this is a situation, if you can remind the listeners of what people in Bru Na Sionna in Shannon have been living with ever since the inspection back in 2017.
Yeah, Bru Na Sionna has been going through it for a long time, in fairness, and you have Gary and Lorraine there, and my heart goes out to them. Like, they had a lovely little house, and they were advised, as everybody else was, well, you're getting on in years, downsize. They looked across, seen an apartment, bought an apartment, and by God, their nightmare started then. So this is what happens. So it's just it's unbelievable, like what can happen and the position and the lifestyle. And a lot of people, like Bru Na Sionna would be one of 400 applicants to the housing agency at the moment for remediation and throughout the country. And like you have young people that went in and thought we were going to be in there for 2 or 3 years, bought an apartment. Then the next thing they started a family and they were thought to move on. But because they're fire defects, they can't sell the apartment. And they can't move on. And now you have a situation where there's overcrowding in apartments. They've overgrown them. And they're still living in danger. Like, that they have to be on their guard all the time. So it's not a nice way to be living, No,
it's not a situation you'd wish anybody to be in, never mind yourself. And look, we want to talk about this scheme as well, this €2.5 billion redress scheme. The government says it'll provide 100% funding for eligible remediation, but do apartment owners like yourselves and like Gary Lorraine actually trust that promise?
Like I said, we campaigned outside there and we done an awful lot. And then what happened was they had to recognise us and they brought us in. We've been inside the meetings there all the time now, and actually in a meeting in the Custom House in the morning there with the Department of Housing, the Housing Agency and the Assistant General Secretary, Caroline Timmins there. But I would say probably from the point of when the new minister came on board, James Brown, he was only about 2 weeks in the job and he reached out to me would I come in and meet him, and I'd be in contact with him on a weekly basis. So he really put his shoulder to the wheel to move things on. And I would think that this year is the year for the people living in apartments with defects, because they've got behind it a lot, and the housing agency, in fairness. There's nobody kind of pulling back. The lads in the housing agency are good guys and they're trying to move it on. And the whole problem all along was that there was no legislation in place. And the previous minister, Dara, he reckoned that we didn't need legislation, but when it went to drawing down money, we were told, no, we do need legislation.
And given that it's taken so long as well, Sam, it's coming almost 15 years after the Priory Hall scandal. I'm sure residents have been frustrated, to say the least, about how long it's taken. And even the Cabinet signed off on these laws back in 2024, but they still haven't been enacted. I'm sure the delay has frustrated people living in unsafe homes.
Yeah, well, it was at the 18th of January 23 when the government announced 100% redress. So that was up to that. Okay, they kind of had Priory Hall, and after Priory Hall, they reckoned, buried their heads in the sand, we didn't have a problem. And it was in 23, in the 18th of January, that they said, okay, we accept we have a problem. We accept we'll have 100% redress. So they said we'll have an emergency fund and an interim measure, and when it went to get to that, then it went on and on. There was no legislation in place. Now, they just finished last week, they're doing the pre-legislative legislation on it, and out of that came a couple of recommendations. One, which was a big problem to about 20% of the developments, that you used to have to own the common areas. Now you don't. That was a big problem for a lot of developments because developers went bust and things like that, and they weren't signed over. The second thing was they said that they recommended that insurance costs, like some developments, their insurance was 36,000 one day, and the next day it was 197,000 because of fire defects. So the government is going to cover the excess of. Well, it's been recommended that they cover the excess of insurance because of it. And the other thing is that was recommended was that they put in place 0% finance loans for maintenance work and things like that wouldn't be covered in the scheme, to bring it up to standard so that you can cut out the likes of levies being applied on people, because the levies just don't work because not everybody can afford them. If people can't afford to pay $3,000 a year management fees, they're not going to be able to pay $15,000 on top of that of a levy per year. So the government has recognised that, and to bring people up to a level of safety, it's been recommended that there be 0% finance loans. Now that's been recommended by all the parties, like parties in power and parties in opposition. So I can't see it being knocked back by the government when it goes to it before the end of the term there, and before the end of the summer recess. So if that kicks in before the summer recess, by the end of the year, things should be up and running fairly well for people.
Sam, one of the strongest criticisms from campaigners is that developers will face zero consequences. How does it sit with residents? And obviously not naming individual developers, but that some of the same developers involved in defective builds are still winning major public contracts today.
They are, yes, and it's going on all over the country, and it's an issue we've raised, and government is reluctant to take them on because in our own instance, we discovered that what they do is the developer hires a builder, and the builder goes bust, and then the developer says, well, I didn't do that. I gave him a spec to the highest standard. The problem is with him, not with me. And what they do is they have the likes of holding companies, and there's only limited funds in it because we spent thousands checking it out ourselves, and we were told there was no point in proceeding. So my advice to people is if government doesn't want to take on the builders, there's no point in the individual developments because you just won't have the finances to deal with these big guys. And so unfortunately, it is a disgrace that they can build. Like some of these have built developments and they've closed down more, and then they're back working the following week and they're building across the road from you and they're building, more apartments and more of the same and winning big government contracts around
and are you concerned then that without any sort of serious accountability, there's a good chance that this could happen again?
Yeah, I think we have moved on a lot, and there's that technology is playing a big part in it. Even, that nowadays, a lot of this can be filmed and down to an app and, before building, during building, after building. So, you can't come along and say, and then they're inspecting us different stages as they go along. So, and then you have thermal imaging and things like that. So, yeah, the standard would have improved a lot, but it still needs to improve a lot more because where there's a will, there's a way, as they always said, to cut corner. And you just need to be at it all the time. But I don't think it'd be quite as bad as what it was, but I do think, yes, scrutiny is certainly required.
Okay, it's essential.
Going along.
There has been an argument, Sam, from others, the likes of Sinn Féin, amongst them, that the scheme, this redress scheme, should mirror the Pyrite Resolution scheme with the housing agency managing works. Would that give residents such as yourself more confidence if it did so?
Yeah, Owen O'Brien there especially, he's done an awful lot on this. But where we differ from the Pyrite scheme is, the Pyrite is a single house. And when you go into a block of apartments, some of them are 7 stories high at the moment, and you're talking maybe hundreds of units inside. So it is totally a different animal compared to the Pyrite and the Mica scheme, where you had a single house. So that's where I would see the difference. And so it has to be treated like for like, because no 2 blocks of apartments is the same. They're constructed, some of them are stone constructed, some of them are timber based constructed. So every apartment is a different day's work, you know what I mean? So I don't know about that, to be honest, I think you have to have a single approach to each block.
Okay. You mentioned earlier on that it was a double blow for people such as yourself. A, finding out that your apartment had serious defects, and B, being expected to pay out sums to address it. Now, many owners have already paid huge sums for emergency works. How important, Sam, is it that retrospective reimbursement actually works in practice? Yeah,
that's a very good point, that retrospective payments, they're working on that at the moment. There's been 8 pathfinders taken to work a way through it, to find an easy way, is the word to use, that to try and find an easy way for these people to get their money back. This is a key issue, and they hope by, I think it's the second quarter to the third, that retrospection should be in place, that they should be able to start paying them back. It's something at the moment that they're pushing hard to get the money back to these people, because they've paid it out, and then not only has those people paid it out, but some of the developments have raided their sinking funds and things like that, and they could do with this money back badly to bring their developments up to standard, they need it for general maintenance and that. So they are pushing hard on that at the moment. But what they tried to do was to get the full legislation in place to get work done on apartments that have no work done on them, to try and get a level of safety there. So that was prioritised. But retrospection is being worked on at the moment, and I expect an announcement on that now in the next couple of months, shortly.
Finally, Sam, what would you say to government ministers, the likes of James Brown, this morning? What do residents need them to do now, not in another year or two, because you've all been living with that sword of Damocles hanging over your head, as you alluded to earlier on, not knowing if today will be the day that something may happen, that cigarette being smoked above your apartment is flicked over the ledge and blows back in, and something seriously disastrous happens to your humble abode.
Yeah, I'd swear you were in the room with me and James Brown. I know that. That's exactly what I've said to them at previous meetings, and I'll probably raise it again in the morning. And this can't happen quick enough for people. I go into a meeting there tomorrow morning, and I'm expecting the housing agency to announce that they have the first load of competent professionals approved. So these will be the people that you go to, and I'm expecting them to announce tomorrow that they're going to allow the next 20 into the scheme moving along, because I was talking to them there over the last week or so, and they said, look, we're ready to let the next 20 in. But what they try to do is to make things easier and to move things along. We were part of a pathfinder, and we went to tender, and we were just about to draw down money, and then it was flagged that, like, okay, there's a problem there. You're getting more than 50% government funding. It had to go up in public procurement. So we had to go back again. So that was something we found out that didn't work. So it's to save other people going through all this. So what they're saying is that I myself, as a director, and would be fairly well clued in, I couldn't work my way through the paperwork. It was that complicated. So, and then your competent professional, like with an architect, an engineer, a surveyor, they find it hard to talk to ordinary people because they talk in a different language. So what they're doing is said, look, you're going to need a projects manager, somebody in between that to bridge the gap. So they're hiring a major company that's going to be a projects manager for all the developments to try and get some sort of uniform on it so that you don't have a delay. And they know exactly how to help each individual director, like how to get through it. So they haven't appointed this company yet. They're still going through it, but not to hold up things. The housing agency itself has decided that it's going to step in as project manager on the next 20 to work between the directors and the competent professionals to move things along. And the one good thing about the housing agency is that some of those guys in there themselves, they live in apartments, so they understand.
They get it.
And they're actually very helpful. And anybody that's going through difficulty at the moment, reach out, contact the housing agency. They're very helpful. Just give them a call and they'll guide you. But I wouldn't go ahead doing anything without guidance from the housing agency, because, as you said, you're talking about thousands, and some places you're talking millions. So if you're looking for their money back on the retrospection, make sure you're on the right side of it and go to the housing agency for advice before you do anything first.
Okay, look, we do have to leave it there, but we'll be watching with interest how developments unfold. But we do hope that you and those living in Bru Na Sionna get the relief you deserve. It's been going on for long enough. Sam Doran, spokesperson for the Not Our Fault campaign. Thanks for joining me on the show this morning.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on the show. Thank you.
Thank you, Sam. And indeed, if you are one of those apartment owners in Bru Na Sionna, get in touch. Let us know your thoughts on this. 0818 400 964. That's the number to call, or you can text or WhatsApp us on 086 1800 964.